Hi, I'm Katie, and this is the Free Art and Design School podcast, web series, whatever. I have another really wonderful guest here today if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Fabrice. I'm a French artist and designer living in California. I work as an illustrator and graphic designer, and I have a lot of projects and passions on the side, like mostly photography and filmmaking, but also illustration and printmaking and making all sorts of little things.
So you've done sort of everything, and I really admire the work that you do. I just posted some of the photographs you took of me in Paris when we met, and they literally changed my life and made me want to be a better photographer. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you got into art making initially when you were, I assume, a child or a teenager or something.
Yeah. Well, art making, I think, was just something that was really easy for me to get into when I was a child. I think that living and growing up in the Paris region was a big factor because arts are hella subsidized in France. And so, it doesn't matter who you are and what your social class is, you're going to end up in museums, you're going to end up stumbling across free screenings of movies in your neighborhood. And so that's, I guess, like the first very very earliest thing that factored in was just living in a place where art is omnipresent and a lifestyle and a philosophy of life. But then it's true that my mother, who was a teacher, also really loved the arts and was a photographer and had an SLR. And when I was born, she purchased a Super 8 millimeter film camera so that she could record my
Oh,
growth as a newly formed human. And so I remember her filming me, and as one of the earliest things that I can remember is probably being filmed, being on film, and like
oh my God.
probably being really intrigued by this object between me and my mom that was like purring, and like probably very quickly, as soon as I could speak, asking her about it, and as soon as I could, like borrowing it to make my own projects with it. Yeah, I remember like asking my mom to help me make films when I was like 5 or 6.
Oh my
We'd
God.
go out in the street and I'd be like, okay, then like film me doing this and film me doing that.
That's so
Um,
wholesome. Oh my God.
thank you. Yeah, and then when I got older, we moved to the countryside, and it was not the same pace. Like it was way more chill, and I was getting a little bit bored, I guess, of this healthy, beautiful lifestyle. And I thought, what if I started writing my own short films? We have a camera, it's sitting there. So I started thinking about little stories that I could make with my friends, and I was like, oh well, how am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? So there was a lot of problem solving involved, and also it was a way for me to hang out with my friends
Yeah.
and socialize because it was like an excuse, like we had a project together. And so yeah, I got addicted to film pretty early on. I remember, like, like my grandmother or like people who are not with us anymore would like know what to get me for Christmas and birthdays. They would get me Kodachrome 40 Super 8 millimeter packs. And then I would have to think wisely about how I would use the 3 minutes per
Yeah.
cartridge that I had, which was also really good school to learn how to be a storyteller and a narrator and a maker of images, is that you have a limited amount. And even today with digital, I still think you have a limited amount of time that you can put into a project before you say it's complete. I still think you should really go to the vitals of the project as much as you can. But yeah, using film will teach you that, and it's true about photography as well. But I'm kind of digressing here.
No, it's literally perfect. You did proto TikTok. You only have 3 minutes to tell your message. Gotta get it out there.
And
Um,
that would be too long today, maybe, for
exactly.
people's attention span. Like, what's 3 minutes? I
That's
don't got 3 minutes.
Yeah. It's crazy to think sort of how different media that people are interacting with completely shape like cultural perceptions.
Right.
Um, I was wondering, you're a film photographer, which I really admire. I met you through other film photographers, and I was wondering if you could talk about your film is a small community, but bigger than some other communities, like certain kinds of printing that I do and that you do. I was wondering if you could talk about how being a film photographer kind of shapes your perception of the world.
Ooh, how it shapes my perception of the world. Well, I think, I read something on the internet a couple of days ago, and it was someone asking the writer Neil Gaiman if they believed in magic, and they said, "Of course I believe in magic. I can write a story, and someone I've never met who lives millions of miles away can laugh and cry reading it, even though it's about people that don't exist."
Yeah.
And I think my relationship to photography is kind of the same. It's kind of like believing in magic because there are so many factors that go into it. And I guess you could say the same thing about many different art practices. You could say the same thing about cooking, which is also something that I think is really important for our culture and really like important for our personal growth, is that you have to gather a bunch of ingredients and you have to constantly have leaps of faith
Yeah.
and be like, okay, yeah, maybe I'm gonna throw that shallot in my cooking pan. We'll see. I don't know. And then, if you're lucky and if you have a little bit of experience, you're gonna be like, wow, okay, yeah, I invented something new. And when you're shooting film, it's pretty much the same thing. You're gonna throw God knows what in your camera, some garbage film that you found in the sewers one day that's expired, that's been like soaked by whatever rain or whatever. You're gonna be like, okay, can this shoot pictures? I don't know. Let's find out. You're gonna put in your camera, and you're gonna bring light to it, which
Hmm.
is kind of magical in itself. It's just like darkness will stop, light will go in, and then some mysterious chemical reactions are going to happen on the film that you barely comprehend as a human because you have to be a scientist to kind of understand them. And then that's a leap of faith. Like, you're only going to be able to take each one of these photos just once.
Mm.
Each moment will be gone after you take the picture, and you don't really know if you've taken it and if you've taken it in a way that will satisfy you,
Yeah.
but maybe it'll be much better than you remember it when you see the results. Because what happens with processes that are manual and analog is that sometimes there's a little bit of magic that gets in there. And that when you look at the result, you're like, oh, okay, that's better than I remembered it. Or it's exactly how I remembered it. But you got to just jump in there and have faith that things will turn out well. And if it doesn't, it doesn't matter. You can just take another picture. It's fine. Like, moments will happen again.
Mm.
You got other pictures of the same thing somewhere. You can take more.
That's a
Um,
really sort of peaceful and at peace philosophy on film photography. I feel like I was always, I thought things were too precious when I started shooting film because I was like, oh, you only have, so many pictures. And part of that is like the financial cost of shooting film. And part of it is we're so used to having an iPhone where you can shoot a million pictures and, nothing matters anymore. But that sounds like you've really sort of made peace with something going wrong and being okay with it, which I haven't when it comes to film. I can't get there.
well, Katie, in life in general, I think that it's important to know how to let go.
This isn't
You know?
supposed to be a therapy session. Come on. But it's really true.
Well,
Really
I
true.
mean, I'm saying it to you, but to anyone who may watch this. I think that digital technology has placed unrealistic expectations of controlling our environment in ways that can be toxic sometimes, because what do you get out of being in control of everything? What do you get out of wanting to nail everything down exactly the way that you want it to? Like, that's not necessarily something that's going to contribute to you being at peace with yourself and with the world and with things being out of your grasp sometimes. And if my artistic practice allows me to have moments when I'm like, Okay, well, this roll of film. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, well, this roll of film really didn't turn out well at all. It's allowing me to mourn, it's allowing me to grieve, and it's allowing me to practice these things. Like, you can't practice grieving every 5 years when someone you know passes or is sick or your dog dies. You have to be able to realize that life is a balance. It's a constant balance that we're trying to achieve between things we have control of and things that slip out of our control. And sometimes they're better than you ever expected they could be because they're outside of your control.
Mm,
Probably more so with film than with digital, to be honest.
yeah.
But who knows? Like, I have a camera, it's a digital camera. It's kind of old. It's probably 15 or more years old. But it has a glitch. And like when you take pictures, it looks like someone dragged dirty fingers across it. And that's why I never got rid of it. Like, I got rid of a lot of my digital cameras because I don't shoot digital. I don't have time
Yeah.
for cables and clicking and all that stuff. But this one is really cool and I'm going to keep it because it has texture, because it has a mind of its own, right? Kind of. And there's a short story by Isaac Asimov which I really love, and I don't remember what it's called, but people will find it, about light sculptures that are made by a machine, and the machine is broken, and someone fixes the machine, and by doing that, they prevent the art from being made.
Mm,
And I think that like there would be a way for digital forms of creating art that I would be really on board of if it allowed for way more mistakes and experimentation. Like if you could just like put a different sensor in your camera. Like you could put a Game Boy camera sensor in your SLR and then have something totally monochromatic come out of it,
yeah.
or something that's dithered, or something that's completely like gray bitmap. And I don't want to do it in post. I don't think that that's fun. I don't. I want the original. I want the raw file to be the way I want it to be. As a person who creates art, I want the raw file to be the way I intended it. I don't want
Right.
it to be somewhere on a hard drive or in a cloud or somewhere. Um,
You're
yeah, and like, like it breaks too easily. Like I wish you could just like mess it up a little bit, like soak your sensors and like make them moldy and then take a picture on them, stuff like that. Because we're made of matter, we're not digitals.
we're not
We're
digital.
physicals.
We're
We're
physical.
physicals.
I love that. There's a video I just saw a little while ago where someone took the Game Boy camera, but they put color filter like RGB color filters on and
Mhm.
then like took three identical photos with the different filters and recombined them. Did I send that to you? Did you send that to me?
I've seen people
You've
do
seen
that.
it.
Yeah, if you have a black and white camera, you have a color camera.
Right. Crazy. And I think that's so exciting. And I think the reason videos like that are really cool is not just the nostalgia of using this like old timey, like pre-digital, beginning digital era technology,
Yeah,
but it's like having the hacking of it or the engineering of it or like the physical manipulation of art. I think that's the thing when I try to explain art making to people who don't usually make art. I'm like, it's really life changing. And I don't use that term lightly. Like when you use your hands to physically make something.
yeah.
And I think that's super trite, but it's very true. And your practice obviously really embodies that. Do you do any of your own developing for film or
Thank
do
you.
you send it
Yeah,
off?
I processed at home. Last winter was pretty grisly in the Bay Area, and I really like a lab that's like pretty far for me to get to. It's like you have to take two buses and stuff, and like the weather was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And also it's expensive, like
Yeah.
even if I don't want to take the bus and I Uber there, like no. So I was like, okay, what does it actually take to process film? I always shied away from it because I was a baby, and B, because I had a lot of like wrong ideas about it. And I was
Yeah.
like, no, maybe it's not as complicated as I think. And that's where the community played a huge part. Like my friends were like, yeah, no, like it's really simple. Like cut the crap. Like you can do it. So I got what I needed, and I started processing color. I never processed black and white. I went
Wow.
straight into processing color.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
Um, and I don't have a huge place. Like, I just like spool the film in my bathroom because there's
Yeah.
no windows in there. And then as soon as it's in the tank, you can take it outside and like process it. And it was really simple and really fast and really cheap. And yeah, and I love that, absolutely. Like the action of using your hands to turn something into art, which is something you can do with a camera, you can do it with a pen. I have a camera. One of my favorite cameras is 100-year-old motion picture camera, and it has a crank. And
Oh,
I think that that crank is such a good example of how you're using your body's motion to create, because as soon as you turn it, the film in the camera moves,
mm,
and you're responsible for every little inch of film that you shoot through your body's motion. It's not like you click and
right.
then you go on a walk and like come back and hope that like the hummingbird like went in your photo. No, it's like really intentional.
Yeah.
It's forced intentionality by design.
Mm.
And I think that's really me. And it's weird because my name in Latin means the one who does stuff with his hands.
Oh my God. Nominal determination, right? That's what that's called. When your name like determines what you do in
I
life. My
don't
last name means
know.
fire, so that's very accurate. So
What?
my
Your
last,
last name?
yeah, it means fire. So,
Oh, that's great.
but maybe doing things by hands is cooler than being an arsonist. Um,
Both are good. They're not incompatible. Set
that's true.
stuff on fire and then film it with your hands.
Yeah. I was gonna ask about your filmmaking process because we've talked about this, and you do you're sort of self-taught in terms of everything, like animation, like stop motion, like how did you? Is it just like you figure out an idea in your head and then you just make it happen and you pursue whatever's possible, or like what's your process like?
There's been many processes, and I think sometimes, in terms of photography as much as in terms of filmmaking, it can be different things that influence a project. It could be the outside world that's telling you, take a picture of me, look how beautiful I am, and you're like, oh, okay, I see you, I'm gonna do it. It can be that you're like waking up one morning and you're like, whoa, that'll make a cool photo or a cool film. Could be that you're talking with someone and that you're like, wow, I really like this person's energy. They're full of ideas. We like the same crazy stuff. Maybe we could do some projects together. Or you have a camera that you want to play with. Like it could be a million things. And I've never had like one creative process. I've always kind of gone through so many different iterations of the same things. Like when people go on my website, they're like, "Oh, it's too confusing. You've designed computer fonts. You've made comics, but you also do watercolor and you also do realistic illustration. You're a photographer, but like you do black and white and you do infrared and you do color and you do film, and then you're also a filmmaker. I'm so confused. You should have just one portfolio for like one thing at a time." And then I'm like, okay, but like if I'm doing one portfolio for my illustration, for example, should it be just my comics? Should it be just
Right.
like my watercolors? Should it be like, because people are going to be confused. They're going to be like, I don't
Yeah.
get it. You're an illustrator, but like on your website, there's illustrations, there are comics, there's funny stuff, there's like really serious stuff. Like, who are you? And I'm like, I just embrace life. And if
Yeah.
something is in front of me and I want to capture it in a certain way that I think is the best way, that's what is primordial. It's not adhering to like a body of work that is always the same. Like it bores me when someone's been doing the same thing their whole life. But it also annoys me when someone whose work I like changes doing what I like. But
Yeah. It's that fine line. Like it drives me absolutely crazy. I'm the same way. I do, printing, photography, watercolor, oil pastel, so many different things. And for job interviews, I've had people tell me like, "Oh, you're all over the place."
mm,
And I really fucking hate that, not just because it, denies me access to getting a particular job or whatever. I couldn't care less about, if someone doesn't like me, it's not going to go very well if I try to work for them. So I'd rather find a place that like sees the value in doing that broad spectrum of work. But on top of that, I think it's very deeply unsettling to me. And I don't know whether it's like a contemporary societal thing or like a historical thing, but like to have to put yourself in boxes and categorize yourself is so strange. And I think it's so tied up with like selling a product. Like I remember when I was writing, I wrote a book like last year, 2 years ago, must have been last year, about like my life and design philosophy, and I sent it to a friend, and she was like, "Oh, well, I don't really get this because it's like half memoir, half philosophy, and like you should just pick one thing." And I was like, "Well, we made up memoir and we made up philosophy.
Mm.
It's stupid that we're, cutting ourselves down or like destroying the interactions between the different fields of our work for an arbitrary distinction that someone else has created." And I think that's great that your website like encapsulates all the things that you make, because you are the connecting force between all of them. And if you only are looking at one piece of the puzzle, you have like a very narrow viewfinder that's cutting off
Yeah.
everything else.
No, but like you're right in the way that like if I had chosen one thing to do for the rest of my life, like it would be, what I'm like worldwide famous for. But I don't see that I can like separate these things. And I think like, some people will get you the way you like be existing as an artist, and some people won't get you, and that's totally fine. But a lot of the artists that I look up to and that I admire do different things with their creativity than just like pouring it into the same container all the time. People like David Lynch or like Salvador Dali and like stuff like that. They've just explored different ways, because you can't be an artist if you're not curious. Like if you're not like, oh, what's that? It's a camera. How does it work? Like, what do you do with it? Okay, lend it to me. I'm gonna try it.
Yeah.
Like then you're just, I don't know, or you're scared, I don't know. But it really feeds one another. Like when I was working on like really complex, really technical projects, like some computer fonts that I've made, like I need to run in the forest with a camera and like take pictures of birds for a couple of days after I've aligned all those little like
Oh my
Bezier
God.
curves. Like, because it's maddening. You can't do like minute work like this for like long periods of time and keep your mental sanity. That's not possible. And same thing, like after you've done like running around and doing totally like random berserk bizarre work, like you might want to sit down and do something really polished in Illustrator or something. It just covers different areas of who some people are.
Yeah.
And that's fine if some people want to be just like monomaniacs and just like do like monochromes their whole lives. Great, like good for them, like that's great. But like that's not necessarily how people have to exist. And it's true that like when you're in the professional field, some people will have a hard time getting you. They'll be like, okay, well, I don't get it, like who are you? But they don't need to know all the stuff that you do. Like if I'm applying for a job, or like if I want to write in a zine with some people, I don't have to tell them about all the things that I've done. But like, there's 24 hours in a day. If you use them well, you can really have fun with all of the areas of creativity and artistic expression that exist and that interest you. Like it's really not going to distract you. What is going to distract you is like not knowing really what drives you, not knowing how to close a project, not knowing how to make a project um bite-sized so that you can actually accomplish it, and then like finish it and then like publish it and then be like next. Because some people just really contemplate for too much time.
Yeah.
um So of course, if you're doing that, then yeah, like just like one trade is going to be really hard, because you're going to be like, oh, I'd like to go back to photography, but like, oh, I don't know where to start. Like, is my camera working? Maybe I need to get it fixed. And like, there's a lot of excuses that are going to happen. But like, if you just like sit down and you're able to just like start designing a sticker
Yeah.
at 8:30 in the morning when you wake up, just because you had an idea and you're like, oh yeah, that would make a cool idea. Okay, I'm going to start designing it, and 2 hours later it's ready to be sent to the printer, then I don't see what the problem is in being a jack of all trades. And you know what? Better being a jack of all trades than a one-trick pony.
Right. It's true. Yeah, I think that's actually what one of the things that drew me to design in the first place is it feels like graphic design isn't one thing, and maybe that's like why a lot of people are like confused by the field, because like is type design a part of graphic design? Well, I think it is. I took type design classes within the graphic
Mm-hmm.
design MFA, but then type designers would be like, "Oh, but like, I don't do photo editing. I don't do the other parts of graphic design." And I think, or some people are like that. And I think that's sort of what's interesting is like we've created a conventional bucket of what it is to be a designer. And we say, these are these things that are in that bucket. And then here are close things that aren't in the bucket. And then there's further things. But those boundaries are completely arbitrary. And like,
Absolutely.
that's why the distinction between what's art and what's design is dumb. And like we keep bringing it up in educational spaces to help people understand design better and their work better. But like, I think that's really in some ways limiting, because then it, you know, if you're just going to make something, just make it and then worry about the
Yeah.
labels later, or don't even think about the labels. You know,
Yeah.
all the pieces of art behind me are,
Exactly. It's a good example. I was
yeah,
thinking it's a perfect illustration of what you're saying. But then exactly like, within the same art form, like it's impossible for me to tell you why I love cinema. Like, is it the
yeah,
storytelling? Like, I love cinematography. I love acting. I love the creativity that can go into set design, costumes, soundtracks. And when I make short films, like I try to make sure that all of the things are given love, because I want to love the cinematography of my film. I want to love every single little artistic choice that is going to be encapsulated by the project. So, and Orson Welles once said, like, if you're a filmmaker, it means you can do every other job
yeah,
or
100%.
something like that.
Or
Maybe I'm
you
like
have
butchering.
to, not even that you
You
can,
have
you
to.
have to.
You have to, especially if you're like, guerrilla filmmaking, like on the go with one camera, like maybe one assistant and like a couple of people are your actors. You have to be able to rewrite stuff on the go. You have to be able to fix their clothing, comb their hair, like create the soundtrack. And that's what I like I love throwing myself into the challenge and being like, okay, yeah, try me. Yeah, and yeah, and we are going to try to make it look good. And yeah, we are going to try to make it look like oops, sorry. Like, and we're going to try to make it look like every single choice of this project is something that we thought about for a long period of time. We are going to make it look like it's storyboarded, even if it's not. But like, because like attention to detail is a form of love of your craft, and considering it as like all of the kinds of like critical angles that people are gonna have when they're gonna receive it. They're gonna be like, oh, like this is not good enough. You have to be super hard with yourself, but also isn't that the point of like, you know, finding challenges to go against? Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
especially when
obviously
you're running on all cylinders at all the time. Like it's crazy. I think that's actually one thing that makes me respect filmmakers a lot is that like filmmaking, like when you're doing film photography, you have to think a lot about each individual shot and the lighting, and like it's a really technical process but also a creative process of like the framing. But then when you're making a film, it's like that times literally 100, because you're doing all of those things at the same time for an aesthetic image. But then, as you said, you're doing the writing. If it's like your personal film, you're doing literally 100 jobs for one possibly like 10-minute piece of artwork. And it's crazy to me that it's such a like exponential difference between shooting still film photography and shooting a film. um and I don't know, I just have a lot of respect for people who can like be good at everything. I did a handful of animated films for my um design MFA, and I am not good at sound design. I am fine at writing, but like not that great at it for like a film piece. And I feel like all my work ended up like really sort of like surrealist, which is fine. But like I don't even think in 100 lifetimes I would have the time to like learn everything that it takes to be a good filmmaker. So I appreciate people like you who are just like, I'm gonna fucking figure it out and just
that's it.
go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really the philosophy. It's not like there's a switch in my head, make good cinematography happen or like write a good line for your film. It's all, we're just going to do what I said, like leap of faith. We're just going to
Yeah.
try,
Mm,
and you can go to the cinema and see a movie that costs several $1 million and be like, they kind of failed,
yeah.
and it cost them millions of dollars, but who knows what happened. Human error is the thing, and it doesn't matter how much money you have, how much experience you have to keep going to the battle. I don't like that word battle because it's like, like angry word, but like you have to keep like putting your hopes up and like fronting and facing and being like, okay, we're gonna try to take some pictures. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And if it works, you're like, okay, cool, that worked. But that's not, I'm not a good photographer. I'm not a good filmmaker. I try and sometimes I succeed in
You're wrong.
attaining my goal, in attaining my goal, in attaining
Sure.
my goal. And
But
people
maybe,
and
but
my
maybe,
favorite pictures that I took are not necessarily other people's favorite
yeah.
pictures. Some people are like, oh, I really don't like this picture. And I'm like, what? That's my best picture ever. And they're like, no, it really is not. And I'm like, wow. So you have to just like follow your own voice, you know? And if you do something that makes you happy, then that's great. If some other people think that you're good at doing it, then that's great. But like, if you keep doing something that you like and no one likes it, who cares? You're doing what you like.
And historically, the artists that make really weird, unique stuff that isn't in line with the stuff that's being produced at the time, like, can also be the ones who are revered the most. I don't think
Yeah.
that's not my favorite piece of advice, because if someone's making like absolute trash and they're like, "Oh, it's okay, I'm just misunderstood," you know, you have to have some level of like
I think that's
critical
fine. I really
awareness.
want someone to revel in their trash. Like, you know, like why not? Like it's a lifestyle. Like, you know, you want to do trash, do trash. Like absolutely 100%.
But then
If
you
that makes
gotta
you happy. But like
reflect on your trash and like understand your own trash. Not
I'm on their
necessarily,
side.
not in a conformist sense, but like if you're really doing something and you're doing it with your all, like you should understand your motivations for why you're attracted to trash and why no one else
Yeah.
is, and then that can help you, like, I don't know, develop
But
your
also
philosophy.
success is not something to seek necessarily at any cost,
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
I don't believe that.
or other people's validation. Like if you're doing something because it makes you happy, and you're the only person in the world to make short films about cigarette butts on the sidewalk, fuck yeah, do it. Because, you know, in the end, nothing matters. Nothing makes sense. Like we're just drifting around in space on the marble. Like what the no, nothing makes sense. To do whatever you want, maybe someone will see the trash that you make in 150 years and be like, whoa, groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And you will be hailed as the new like leader of a religion because you were making trash and being misunderstood for years.
Okay.
But
There will always
you
be
know,
French people to appreciate the cigarette butts on the ground. So,
I don't know. I don't know if there will always be people in general. I don't know if that's what nature wants.
well, we'll see. Yeah, difficult to conceive of ourselves as part of nature when society has gone in such the other direction. Uh,
When we've destroyed it so much, yeah.
yeah. I was wondering, you've given so much incredible advice. So, because normally I ask the question like, what advice would you give to younger designers? I think I want to ask you a different question to summarize, which is like, um, how do you have so much energy and you do so much work. How do you inspire, like, how do you give advice to other people to like do the work even when society's beating you down, or you feel like distressed or despondent, and it feels like you're going nowhere, like
Hmm.
someone who's the opposite of you, who like is feeling,
What do you mean? I am getting nowhere sometimes. No,
no,
you can't paint it black and white like that.
right, but
Like
you make so much
definitely
work, and I think that's incredibly inspiring, and especially like so many people face artist block. Like how do you, like
I
what
face
advice?
artist block too.
I don't believe
Just
that. You
yeah,
post
of course
stuff
I
every
do.
day. What are you talking about?
Well, that's kind of the thing, you know, like I've been making short films for like 30 years since I was a baby, photos for pretty much just as long. And sometimes it's hard to know what else needs to be told, what else needs to be done. You know, I think that my main source of inspiration and wanting to like make films when I was growing up was watching movies in the 80s, in the 90s, and being really into cinematography shot on film. Like I really thought that film was beautiful because it's 24 photographs per second. And you can just take any of these photos, you can single it out and be like, that's a photo. You're not just like filming, you're taking 24 photos of the life in front of you, that each one of these photos, you can enlarge it, you can look at it like standing on its own.
Mm.
And when digital filmmaking started becoming predominant, I was less inspired by cinematography because everything kind of looked as sharp and soulless as watching the news on TV. And I was like, where's the depth of field? Where's the grain? Where are the vibrant colors? Like I wasn't seeing what I wanted. And I kind of stopped making films, and like also like other factors came in, but like I kind of lost my drive and my motivation. So if someone is an artist, and then after that, there were movies that were starting to be made on film again, and people were like, yeah, like let's shoot movies on film again, movies like The Lighthouse, or like in recent times, like the second season of Euphoria, stuff like that. I think that's what it's called, Euphoria. The show is Zendaya. And I was like, wow, great. People are taking cameras again. They're putting film in it and they're creating visuals that are stimulating me and that make me want to go back to it. And I'm going to order film right now from Kodak, put in my camera, and revel in the beauty of whatever the results are going to be if I don't screw it up too bad. But if someone is going through a period of doubt or like lacking creativity, it's fine. Like it's also fine if you decide that you don't want to be an artist anymore. Like if you have bigger fish to fry one day and you're like, this is distracting me, I need to focus on my family, then do it. But if you really want to be an artist, ask yourself why. Is it for the good reasons? Is it because it helps me grow as a person? Is it like my path to growth is going to happen through artistic creation? If you're seeking, money or fame, like don't do it. Like just get into Bitcoin or whatever it's called and like make an app, that counts how much money you're spending with the other apps. Like that sounds like a better way of becoming rich.
That's a
Yeah,
good
you're
place
getting,
to end
huh?
it. I was gonna say it really seems like you're really interested in just finding the magic, and that's why you love analog and you like seeing the world through um, handmade lenses, and both metaphorical and literal. So thank you for being here. You're an amazing person to interview. You have so much energy. I'm gonna ask you to do a lecture soon, so be prepared.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna get ready for my TED talk. No pressure.
This was
You're too
your TED
kind.
Talk. You're done.
All right. Wait, that's it?